And
Hello.
welcome. Hello. just hello. No welcomes. We do not welcome people anymore. Isn't that right,
No,
Andy?
new policy. Yeah, no welcoming at all. We've got someone who's probably been our most anticipated guest, I would say, not least because we had to postpone his first recording, but also because I think he's probably been mentioned the most out of anyone in the world on our podcasts.
Yes. Yes. Drum roll, please, for
Who've we
Alan
got?
Dolan, the breath guru. Short intro because it's a fairly long episode relative for us because we just had so many questions. We could have gone on a lot longer. So we won't keep you too long here, but we're going to talk about breathwork and the breathwork industry and the miraculous healings that Alan has seen and where the industry is going and how he was featured in the article and how he got a book deal and all these amazing things.
And I haven't just drunk the Kool-Aid. I actually had a one-to-one session with Alan. I looked it up in January 2019, and it was incredibly powerful. My first experience of breathwork. So yeah.
That's another thing I sent you on, right?
You sent me on that. Yeah, you sent me to him in January 2019. Yes. It was brilliant. Yeah, really, really good. Enjoy.
Cheers. Hey listener, if you're enjoying the insights and stories we share on our pod, then don't miss out on any of our episodes. Hit the subscribe button to download and listen to our conversations at your convenience.
Alan, welcome to the show. Start off nice and easy, hopefully. How did you get into breathwork? And also, can you explain what breathwork is?
Okay, so I think I got into it, simply put, really stress. I was in a really good job that really didn't suit who I was and didn't really, the match wasn't there. I was working in Saudi Arabia, Riyadh. I'm a gay man. That's probably not a great match. I should probably just have gone the whole hog and gone to Lagos and lived there. But basically, I was just really stressed out. I was on a 10, I would say, on a 10 scale. And I was looking for something to alleviate that. I didn't want to leave the job at that point, and I was kind of felt a bit boxed in by it all. And I started to do yoga, and I knew that yoga would bring my stress levels down, and indeed it did. But the bottom line was it opened things up big time, and I realized there was so many more dimensions to yoga than purely a de-stressing tool. So I got really intrigued by that, and gradually my job became less. I was a PR and communications manager in the aerospace industry. And gradually my job became less and less and less engaging, and the yoga became more and more and more captivating. And I thought that it was time probably for a sabbatical. So I took a year out, and the plan was there was no plan, because up to that point I'd lived very much by my diary and been scheduled at the wazoo most of the time. And it was PR, so I was out pretty much every night as well. I was smoking a lot, I was drinking a lot until yoga kicked in, and then that sort of fell by the wayside. So I took a year out, and the only thing I booked was I went to Spa Samui and had a 2-week or 3-week detox with the whole bit, colonics and fasting and all of that. And I thought that would be a good way to begin. And then I booked a yoga teacher training, and that was my insurance policy. So that if nothing else happened, I'd open a yoga retreat. And at that point, there weren't so many around. It was kind of a new idea. And I got to Costa Rica. I was at this wonderful place called the Nasara Yoga Institute, an amazing, amazing place. And I was just in heaven. I was with 53 other people who had an equal love of yoga. And we had the most amazing faculty there, people who are really experts in their field. So we studied the scriptures and the Bhagavad Gita, and we had a couple of classes a day. And it was just a great setup, really, really good. So I was blissed out for that whole month. Plus, you're on this amazing peninsula in Costa Rica, and literally like sea turtles kind of coming up on the beach to lay their eggs and stuff. It was just, paradisical. And we had a day off, and one of the guys on the course, in fact, two of the guys on the course said, we've got this thing called conscious connected breathing. We'd like to give the group the gift of a session. And I was less than gracious. I seem to remember. I was kind of, what have you got to teach me about breath? I'm a yogi, baby. I've got, my pranayama and all of that, which I loved. And anyway, I went along, and it was short. It was like a 45-minute session. I think 12 of us rocked up. There were 2 facilitators, but 45 minutes later, the world was a different place. It had really, I call it tectonic plate shifts, when you get those really big quantum movements. And I'd done a lot of work up until that point. I'd been traveling all over the world. I'd been to India, done that trip, and the Himalaya and all of that. And I remember before leaving Riyadh, I'd sort of spoken to the universe and I'd probably prayed and said, make it obvious, whatever this thing is that I'm looking for that I haven't yet found, make it really bloody obvious. Don't make it subtle. I need a real lightning bolt. And indeed, that was exactly what happened. It was so clear that was the next step. And I think what it was a number of things, but principally it was the fact that breath, like in a way, the fact that people have such low expectation of what breathwork can do is like a secret weapon. Because often people come in and they're just like, yeah, whatever. And that was very much me. And what in effect happened was, people would probably call it a download. I just really frame it as I was given information that was truth. And one of them was, the first thing was really, you've been depressed since you were 12 years old. I was 40 at that point. And it was like a missing piece of the jigsaw puzzle just coming into the picture and slotting in there. And I knew it was truth. And also, whatever part of me was communicating was saying, and it doesn't have to be this way. You can clear out the emotional sort of underpinning of what's keeping this in place. And that got my attention big time because I'd been ill on a pretty regular basis, almost monthly. And I'd be kind of incapacitated, usually in bed for a couple of days. And in the end, I called it my throat thing because I thought it was physiological. I didn't realize that I knew so little about mental health at that point. I didn't even make the connection that there could have been something involving mental health. I just thought it was a throat thing. I had a sore throat usually when it happened. And I used to just get a pile of books and just sit it out and wait it out. So when that piece of information came in, it was like light bulb city. A lot of things became very clear to me. And I was hooked, really. And the other thing that happened, which I think really happens to a lot of people who try breathwork, is I got a huge connection to whatever you call the all that is. I call it God, but whatever word you want to use is fine, in a way that I'd never experienced before. I knew the theory. I'd read all the books, but this was a visceral connection through every cell of my body. And it was like unlike anything I'd ever done. And I'd done ayahuasca and stuff at that point and tried various substances, both legal and illegal. And it was like nothing I'd ever experienced. And the fact that I was generating this, and I knew it was me generating, it wasn't something alien that was coming into me. It was coming from here. I knew it was coming from my heart. So that it blew my paradigm, what I thought of as the world. Just, it opened up in sort of, I see it as like concentric circles. It just exploded those. And I realized that I knew very little as a human. And my life to that point had been very kind of compacted. And it put me into a very expansive state of being. And I was just hooked from that point on. So being somebody with quite an addictive personality, I then went away, booked 14 sessions on the trot, did it for 14 days with a facilitator, and then picked up the ball and did it myself. And 12 weeks later, having cried a lot and had various experiences with it, the emotional underpinning had gone. A lot of childhood stuff had been cleared out. And I didn't really experience any form of depression from that point. And I don't use the phrase, I'm very aware of the fact. I don't want to talk about it being cured or anything like that. What I would say is I've got the propensity to go back there if I do the wrong things. But now I know how to navigate it and not do the wrong thing. So I've had no experiences of it since that period, and that's now coming up on 22 years. So that was how I found it. There was two questions, I think.
Well, what is breath work? But
fantastic.
yeah,
I think you've answered them.
Yeah. I mean, what is it? You could be here for months and still not answer that question. I think the thing I love about it, there's a lot of things I love about it, but one of the things I really love about it is everybody has a unique experience with it. It's not cookie cutter. It's very bespoke, and it will work with you exactly where you are on any given day at any point in your journey, and it will give you exactly what you need at that time. So in a way, it's impossible to define it. If I define it to a client, if I'm doing a workshop or a one-on-one, and I say, it's a self-healing modality. It's coming from us. It's not anything I'm doing to you, Mr. Client. It allows us to open up our respiratory system. Most of us don't breathe very well. We're quite closed down. And it does this what I thought of as sort of real magic. It puts the body into what I thought of as a recalibration mode, whereby anything that was out of harmony or balance would start to move back. So you could say optimum factory settings, and we'd get to access stuff that is normally not accessible at all. And as Richard was doing his PhD, he flipped me a paper he'd found, which explained it perfectly. And I didn't even know that paper existed. I knew viscerally what was happening, but I had no scientific explanation. And in fact, it's called, Richard, remind me, it's temporal...
Transient hypertotality, is that
there
the
we
one
go.
from
Transient
Williams, 2007?
How wonderful is that? I had no clue. I'd had experience empirically of that. But when I saw it, these people in 2007 had actually tracked it and knew exactly why all these amazing things were happening. And I guess that was it. I was just absolutely hooked. Apart from anything else, the efficacy, it just works really well, And luckily, in some ways I feel lucky that I didn't know that I was experiencing depression, because I probably would have drugged it and gone the conventional medical route. And of course, now what we're finding is the things like the SSRI inhibitors don't actually work very well. And I think there's a huge gap now that breathwork could fill, given the right conditions and the right training and professional approach to it, in the same way that psychotherapy is regulated. I think, we're sort of moving in that direction now with breathwork, and I think it could fill that gap in a very healthy way, in a very effective way.
Yeah, we want to speak more about the sort of regulation of breathwork later on, but you have been sort of on the cusp of this. You're now one of the sort of elder statesmen of the breathwork industry in the UK. And when you, I guess, first started it, breathwork was even less well known than it is now. So how did you identify that this was going to be your life work, and that this was, well, you've been calling it the breatholution as well, but you've been coining that for years. How did you know that breathwork was going to explode like this?
Do you know, Rich, I've never, ever doubted it. Since that first breath session, I knew it was dynamite. I knew it was gold. If it could get to me, with my very left brain kind of cynical approach and just blow those doors open, I knew it would work for everybody. I had an innate knowing of that, and an innate trust, and I never doubted it. And when I started Breath Guru, the only doubt I had was too early for the market, because I'm an Aries, Leo ascendant, I'm fiery, and I was just go, 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 go. And in fact, it took me 7 years really to get any kind of sort of leverage in there and any kind of opening in there. And I spent those first 7 years just educating people, because people just like me were saying, why do I need to pay you to breathe? That's ridiculous, And of course it's not. And that was a gap in the knowledge. So at the beginning, I'm just sort of scanning back and seeing if I don't really feel like I had any doubt at all. I knew the value of it. It was very clear to me that, particularly from the mental health point of view, and of course, since then, I've had, worked with thousands and thousands of people, and I know that it works in many different areas. I've only ever seen it do good. A lot of times it just blows my doors off. And sometimes it's just beyond awesome in the original sense of the word. It's almost like what I would have termed miraculous. Some stuff that I've seen is just incredible, particularly in terms of time and the efficacy in relation to time.
That actually was one of our questions, in terms of, could you talk a bit about some of the profound healing you've seen over the years?
Sure.
What we're talking about here.
So at the beginning, I really didn't know. It was kind of suck it and see, really. I was just working a lot. I worked with, on average, about 7 people a day. And I was hooked, and I was just really intrigued, really curious about, where are the parameters for this? And every time I thought I'd found them, a client would come in and blow them away. So what I realized pretty soon was that it was infinite. In terms of my experiences, it seemed like we were infinite and it was infinite. And of course, part of the whole beauty of breathwork is the connection. So you're connecting with yourself at a very profound level. And it's really answering that who am I question in a very visceral, understandable way, But in terms of stuff that happened, I think there are 2 pivotal ones for me. One was a soldier who'd seen active duty in the Falklands, and he hadn't slept. When I saw him, he hadn't slept for, I think it was about 15 years. He'd had night terrors, PTSD, and he hadn't slept properly. And he looked like a ghost. He walked in the room and he was just white, like really white. He was hardly there. And his wife, as often happens, his wife had gently nudged him in my direction. And we did 4 sessions together, and they were pretty big sessions. They were quite emotional, but certainly doable. I helped him navigate through those experiences. And at the end of the 4, he was sleeping like a baby. And we were in Spain, and he went back to live he lived in Glasgow, I think, at the time. And I kept in touch with him and was checking out, and he was absolutely fine. So, something that's that profound. My sessions were 90 minutes, so 6 hours essentially of breath work had absolutely cleared whatever it was that was held within his nervous system, his cellular memory, however you want to frame that. And that really got my attention because, of course, there's so many, veterans and all sorts of people experiencing various kinds of PTSD. The second one was a lady who was an incest victim and rape victim, and it was toddler rape. She was 2 and 3 and 4 years old when this was all happening. And when she came into the room, she described herself as toxic. And she said, I think I'm beyond any kind of help. And she was medicated, and she was an alcoholic because when she had free time, she wanted to numb it. So she just drank. And she was very successful. She's a really successful career person. And she spent all her hours either working or drinking. So I guess she was mid-30s by the time I saw her, and she hadn't had a holiday since graduation because she didn't want to have free time, because when she had free time, she drank. So she just filled her life with work. And I said, well, you're here. Why don't we just give it a whirl and see what happens? And again, 4 sessions, big, emotional, but definitely navigable. And I didn't really know by the end of the 4, but that was all we'd got time for. She was going back to her abode. I was in Spain. And I thought that something good has happened here. I don't know quite what, and I don't know what the extent of it is. And when she was due to go back home, she actually diverted and went to Ibiza. And she had some friends who were over in Ibiza on holiday. And she said, I think I'm just going to change my flights and go back and see them. And I thought, well, that's a really good sign. And then that was in October. And I followed up with her as I do with all my clients. And she was a little bit like her cards were pretty close to the chest. And she wasn't really letting me see much. And then on January the 1st, I'll never forget this. It was January the 1st. I got downstairs, checked into my mail. My computer blew up. I was like, okay, I guess it's a cyber cafe. Went down to the cyber cafe, and her email was the first one in the inbox. And she said, I'm sitting in Luang Prabang in Laos. I've taken 6 months off work. Every morning I wake up thinking that it, in capital letters, is going to come back. And I'm slowly but surely realizing that it has gone forever, at which point I am in tears and boo-hooing. And people are looking like, what the hell going on with him? But it just really, really touched my heart, because this was somebody who thought she was beyond redemption and beyond saving. In fact, 4 sessions, again, 6 hours, good to go. And I saw her since. I've seen her in her home country, and we've done sessions since then, and they're really just top-ups. That work was done. And the beautiful thing about, one of the innumerable beautiful things about breathwork is once it's done, you don't need to go back and revisit it if it's processed. So that's the one. If I had to choose just one, that would be it, because it was just so huge and so touching and something so extreme. It doesn't really get more extreme than that, So I guess, those would be the ones that would stand out there, Andy.
Yeah, I think that hope is such a valuable sensation when people are struggling, because when you have mental health issues like depression, like I did for 18 years, more than half my life, you just think this is normal, this is life. And when you just get that glimpse of, oh no, you can be free from this, it makes you want to continue, healing, especially mental health issues, chronic issues. They are long healing journeys. And
absolutely.
Often you'll have relapses, but you've got the hope that, okay, well, the relapses, they're less frequent over time.
Yeah, and I think the fact that you're getting tangible evidence that it's working is great leverage. The big thing with self-development or healing or that whole sector is, how do you get your client to continue with the work? That was always my conundrum at the beginning. And in fact, a certain amount of clients with a certain amount of self-discipline would pick up the ball and run with it. But there's another set who just don't have that yet within their psyche, that kind of drive. But the fact that they were getting these like, wow, I'm feeling really good on it. And now actually we've got the opposite end of the coin. Now it's like, oh, I'm feeling great. I don't need to do that anymore. Whereas of course it's a practice, so you do need to continue with it. Technology's helped. Everybody and his dog's got an app now. We've got ours, and that's been very helpful in terms of it's almost like having somebody else in the room there with you as you're doing your practice, to help you navigate whatever it is you're experiencing on any given day. Yeah.
Mm. I was actually going to ask about that, because have you found the sort of online shift with COVID? Because having done breathwork online and in person, I mean, I think you know what I'm going to say, but the in person was just immeasurably better for me.
Yeah.
So how have you found that shift?
So to be honest, I had to be dragged kicking and screaming into the online world. I was not, because I loved the intimacy of the personalized sessions, and the physical proximity. I'm quite hands-on when I work. And I just was like, this is a much less than. Anyway, I've since learned. And what I see now is they're completely different things, and they should not be compared because they're not the same. I use the analogy of fruit quite often. You can't compare an orange to a banana. They're both fruit, but they're entirely different in terms of their texture, how they taste, etc. And it's very much the same with online and in person. In some cases, online is superior to in person. If you think about anybody with safety issues, acrophobia, that sort of thing, they're much happier being in their safe, home environment, certainly initially, to establish rapport and all of that sort of stuff. It's absolutely superior to work with them in that way. And then they've got a choice, hopefully, afterwards, once they've sort of come into their bodies a little bit more and grounded and feel a bit more secure, then maybe at that point we've got an option. But there really are different things. And that's one of the things when we do the training programs, pretty much everybody is reticent about going into the online stuff when they do their case studies. And almost everybody has a turnaround because they see that, in fact, it has a lot of value, And apart from anything else, think about the flexibility from the point of view of a practitioner. You can be literally anywhere on the planet. You can work with anybody anywhere on the planet. Talk about a market, it's huge. Our mutual friend, Rich James, he did the program, did a great job. He was right at the beginning of COVID, did some free stuff on Instagram, I believe, got his whole business running online. And then he's like, okay, I'm going to move to Costa Rica. It made no difference to his business whatsoever. So the flexibility aspect from a practitioner's point of view is wonderful. Now I enjoy both of them just for different reasons. I really like the fact I get to work with people who I wouldn't normally be able to work with, but I still love the proximity stuff. I head to London a couple of times a year. I've had the retreat in Lanzarote for over 20 years. So they're both good, but it's apples and pears, bananas, as the case may be.
Yeah, I have some takes on that, given that I conducted my PhD research study online. There were people who said to me, leading breathworkers who poo-pooed my study. Some said, you should never do breathwork online. Some said you should never do the first session online. Some said it doesn't work online. Some people, a very well-known breathworker told me breathwork doesn't work for anxiety, so I'm not going to help you recruit for your study. Okay. And of course, we had phenomenal results, large effect size, statistical significance, the largest randomized controlled trial ever on conscious connected breathing. And, people seem to just form opinions based on very little evidence without actually testing it. So I certainly think that conscious connected breathing works online, and the evidence suggests it does. And I would really agree that it's different drinks for different needs, as they would say in the office, and that some people will prefer it online, some people will prefer it in person. For example, if you live somewhere miles from a breath worker and you can only get to a breath worker once every few months, going once every few months rather than every week online, you're obviously going to get much better results by going every week online. And as you said, some people, when I've been facilitating workshops, one of your workshops, Alan, when the energy was going wild and people were having huge processes and people were doing the kicking and pounding, and I was dealing with one lady who was just very scared of all those loud noises, and clearly she would have preferred online breathwork because you can't hear people screaming, shouting and crying when during the online stuff. And plus the convenience of not having to travel. If you are in London, you have to get the tube and you're in an altered state. That's you're vulnerable there. So I think there's a lot of benefit to online work as well as the in-person stuff.
Interesting what you were saying about the various reactions you had from people around working with anxiety. I would say 75% of my work at the moment is around anxiety. It's undeniable. And I think your stats were very clear in the PhD. It was very clear. When we did the John Case thing, we were talking about it just prior to the recording starting. I worked with the political correspondent for The Guardian, who's a lovely guy called John Case, and he was very transparent in terms of his journey. He talked about mental health issues, breakdown, heroin addiction, and he didn't really know much about breathwork. And I think one of his colleagues had sort of gently nudged him in my direction, and we did the session, and he was very much raised eyebrow, and that's fine, no problem with that at all. But by the end of it, he'd done the arc. He'd done a 180 and he absolutely loved it. And he wrote the article very transparently. He talked about his cynicism and then what he'd experienced. And his main thing was anxiety. And he posted it came out in hard copy on the Saturday. I remember getting about 25 mails and thinking, oh, that's a little underwhelming for The Guardian. And then on Monday, it went online and it went bonkers. The Guardian got something like 23,000 hits on the article in a day. I've got a very robust website. It broke down. It just couldn't take the traffic that was coming through. And the key word, as far as I'm concerned, was anxiety, because it's just so pervasive. And that was why I got the offer for the book, because they'd seen that and they knew that there was something in the zeitgeist there that was really relevant, and particularly post-COVID. People sort of relax, and then here it all comes. There's all the stuff we've been suppressing during that very trying period. So I find it absolutely incredible that people would have any doubt at all. I think that the mistake people make, though, around it is, I had somebody come in the other day and he said, yeah, I'd like to get rid of my anxiety. And I think you have to reframe that and sort of manage the expectations and say, well, anxiety is a human emotion, and it's something that we're programmed to feel, and we're all going to feel it at different levels. The key is being able to navigate it and get it down to reasonable levels. I woke up with it the other day. It was Sunday. I woke up and it was rocking around there as soon as I opened my eyes. And I checked in with it and I realized, it's about that. And I thought, what, that's a reasonable response to what's actually happening. So there was nothing wrong. Did my breath practice. 20 minutes later, done and dusted, moved beyond it and got on with the day. I think it's that sort of thing. Breathwork is not a magic bullet. It's not something that's going to, okay, now I'm evolved and I'm going to wear white and on all the time. It's a tool and it has to be used in order to be effective. And you have to be quite resolute with it. And it won't get rid of your stress. It won't get rid of your anxiety, but it will help you to navigate those very effectively. And certainly, we both have experienced depression. Depression is a response to, I think of it as the filing cabinet being full, emotional content that hasn't been processed. So what it can help us do is open that filing cabinet and begin to process that content so that we don't get those extreme responses, which is really the body's way of just saying we're full. There's no more space. And therefore, we're just going to pull the plug and go into pause mode, So clearly I'm biased because I work with this stuff every day and have done for over 2 decades, but it is pretty incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. The anxiety thing, I think lots more people have anxiety than they used to. And I think there's definite reasons for that. But I also think there is a section of that growing population who are just victims of concept creep. Whereas in the past, you would just say, I'm worried about something. And that would be a healthy reaction to a stressor. Now people think any kind of worry is a pathology. And I think that's not necessarily the case. And when someone says like, I want to get rid of my anxiety, it's a little bit like having a red warning light coming up on your car dash, let's say it's your problem with your carburetor or something like that, and you're just like, I don't want to fix the carburetor, I just want to get rid of that red light. The anxiety is normally a warning sign that something in your life is awry or amiss, that needs attention. So I think that's a nice way of framing it.
And of course, there's way more stimulus and stimulants for that red light to be on nowadays. Just how we live. Cities, completely not designed to live in a city. Most of the people I see when I go to London are living life at a rate of knots and juggling their various responsibilities as to the best of their ability, but it's simply too much. And they're normally then deprioritizing their own self-care. That normally goes somewhere down the line, and that's the kicker. So what my thing really with the vast majority of people I work with is reprioritize yourself. It's not selfish to look after yourself properly, and you'll be in a better position to support those around you in whatever that looks like to you once your needs are met. I think that's part of that. Maybe it's a sort of a British thing, I'm not sure about, sacrifice yourself in favor of others, which is it's terrible advice.
The martyr thing, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Irish Catholics.
Can we talk a bit more about the physical side of breathwork? Obviously, it's got undeniable, amazing impacts on mental health. But in terms of, I'm thinking two parts perhaps. One is what's happening to you physically when you do conscious connected breathing.
Yeah.
And two is, you mentioned you're quite hands-on with your work, and I know that you kind of adjust people, if that's the right term.
Yeah.
Can we talk about what's happening there as well?
Yeah. Well, I think actually Rich is probably the expert. In fact, I'm bringing him into Breath Guru this year to look at the physiological side of things within our trainings. We've been training people now for a good few years. Rich was on one of the first training programs. And I think my forte is really the psychotherapeutic and also the hands-on bodywork stuff. So to answer in reverse order, that filing cabinet analogy is quite a good one in some ways. And when people come with elevated stress levels or anxiety or depression, that is in the body. So it makes sense then that by working with the body, we can find out A, where these things are located, and B, begin to open up those areas so that whatever energy is being held there in the file can be released and processed. So that's the idea behind getting hands-on. We call it body mapping. It's a form of acupressure, and it really focuses in on sort of key areas in the body. That if you just had to choose one area in the body, I would say solar plexus. Solar plexus for me is almost like our intersection between the heart area and then the will down in the gut. And it's a big indicator of how stressed you are. If you just stick your thumb in to your solar plexus area now and just check in with it. For most of us, when we go in just a little bit and then just see how far you can go without it getting too painful, there's some resistance to getting in there. So if I just had to choose one, that's really the one I tend to go for most. In fact, the whole body is, we can hold stuff anywhere. I tend to focus mostly on, my thing is really embodiment. So most people on the planet right now aren't inhabiting their bodies, which is strange to even say that. And even when I started to work, the early adopters were mostly yogis and people like that. And I was thinking, of course, these people are going to be super embodied. Really rare, particularly yogis, because they tend to have quite tight cores. And the Pilates people and all that, again, often really overtoned cores. So I spend a lot of time just opening up that area so their energy can flow down properly. So if you think about the physical body as being here, and then the energy body as coming in, and actually the optimum would be, it would be congruent. Most people are more like this. They're half in and half out. And of course, our culture elicits that also. We're a very intellectual, kind of audio-visual culture. So we're eliciting being here a lot of the time, wearing these headsets and all of that. So it's actually quite rare to meet somebody who's embodied. I don't actually remember meeting somebody in recent history who's fully inhabiting their vehicle. And of course, what does that say in terms of how we're going to use the vehicle? How, I use the rather flippant analogy of, have you tried to drive your car recently with one bum cheek on your driver's seat and the rest of you out the vehicle? It's quite challenging. Both feet on the pedals, hands on the wheel, now you're talking. But that, for better or worse, that's where most people are. So my thing really is I work a lot with the legs, I work a lot with the hips. Solar plexus is a key one that sort of tends to open up the upper area. And just by bringing touch to the area, immediately the client's attention is going to go to where you're touching. So just something as simple as putting your hands on the feet. Immediately the client's attention is going down there. And therefore, if their attention's going there, energy's going there. Energy will follow attention. So if you want to bring somebody in, well, simple, in some ways, pop their hands on the feet, immediately everything starts to flow. So in the instructional videos we've got on the app, I talk about most people being upside down pyramid shape. And what we're going for is at least a kind of let's see if we can get it. Oh, there we go. At least equal distribution, if not, pyramid shape. In other words, they're super grounded, super embodied, and then less and less as they go up. And in fact, what you'll find is, what most practitioners find, when they become more embodied, the mental faculties work better. It's like your mind goes from that white noise place to laser beam, and your mental acuity actually goes up, as opposed to the opposite. It's not like it doesn't actually need that much energy to focus and operate effectively. So I guess part way to explaining how we approach that whole thing. And of course, it's like another dimension then on top of the actual technique itself. So you can go in deeper, the efficacy is increased, the power, you could say, of the session is often increased, and literally just one point can really open things up. And I think that in itself is there's a sort of almost like an inherent danger in that. We were talking prior to the recording of, this idea of standards within the profession. I think people can often get carried away by the fact they're like, whoa, this is super powerful. I had this workshop experience and I had this big catharsis, and now I'm going to go and do that. Absolutely not. 20 years and I'm still really beginning this. I may be perceived as an elder, but really you just realize how infinite we are and how much there is to learn. So I have a certain amount of capability, but there's every single client you're learning each time. Yeah. But it's an art. For me, it is an art. I don't see it just as a sort of a mechanical rote thing. It's very much intuition is as important as any of the technical stuff that we know, to feel your way into the field and feel your way into what's appropriate for any particular person you may be working with. Mm. So, Rich, I don't know whether you want to say something about the physiology.
Well, I was thinking, why there's no research on acupressure. No one has ever done anything on acupressure. I know I'm in conversations with other potential PhD students about doing future research, but I would love to see a study of one group doing regular breath work with affirmations and acupressure, and one group not doing it, and seeing if there's any difference there. I think that would be an interesting one.
Especially with the whole Me Too thing. Now we're very clear that we need permission to go hands-on with somebody. There needs to be boundaries. There needs to be some sort of signaling system so that if it's too much for them, we know to back off, etc. But in fact, when I always put that out there to my clients, and they're often quite the opposite. They're like, no, go for it. I want to get the max out of my session. So quite the reverse, really, of what I was expecting. I thought I might find reticence, and in fact, I don't. But yeah, you're right. But in a way, this is a relatively new way of working. Man's been working with breath for at least 25,000 years. The yogis have got recorded data on pranayama that's that old. But for me, it's really as old as we've been conscious, which is, depending on who you look at, 400,000 years or so. So it's pretty obvious to me that man would start to experiment and ask these questions using rhythm, using movement, using breath. So for me, it's something very ancient that we've rediscovered. But the rediscovery, 50s, 60s, and, Stangroth and the rebirthers and all of that, and the holotropic, they weren't interested in stuff. They were basically hippies who had been dropping lots of acid, and then suddenly it wasn't available. So they were, looking for other ways to reach altered states of consciousness. And data was not really at the forefront of what they were prioritizing. So that was why I was so excited when you did your PhD, really, to get some meaningful data. And of course, that's now only going to increase. You've sort of opened those doors now. So there's going to be hopefully a lot more people doing that. But in a way, that's what I love about it as well. It's very cutting edge. We don't have these precedents behind us like the yogis have, the pranayama. We don't have that with conscious connected breathing. And I find that really exciting because it is really new frontiers. And as I mentioned earlier, every time I think I understand something, or I think I know where the sort of perimeter is, somebody will come in and just blow that away for me. And at the moment, I haven't found any. I just really haven't found any.
Yeah. Well, what direction do you think the industry is going in then? Having come so far, but where's it going?
Yeah, I think we're at the beginning of the curve. I don't think we're anywhere near the middle. I see a parallel with what happened to yoga. We're at that point now where a lot of people are getting interested, a lot of people are training. And what happened to yoga, as you probably remember, was from it being kind of lentil eating hippies just back from Goa or India, it then became everybody and his dog was doing it, and I think the same thing's going to happen with breathwork. I think it has an advantage in that there's a certain section of the population who will never ever go to a yoga class because they perceive it as spiritual, and the iconography and all of that sort of stuff will put a certain amount of people off. Breathwork doesn't really have that. So we're ahead of the game in terms of that bit. And that's one of the beautiful things about it. It's the utility of it. Do you have lungs? Great. You can do this. Yes, there are contraindications, but they're quite minimal if you've had a severe mental illness, among others. But the vast majority of the population are really safe to do this. And it doesn't need expensive equipment. And even if you are living in Ulaanbaatar and can't get to a facilitator, there are downloadable tools to help you. So personally, I think it's going to be bigger than yoga. We're not at that point yet. We're at the point now where it's going to be professionalized, and it won't be sufficient. You go to a workshop, a weekend workshop, and then be like, okay, I'm going to teach this now. It just won't be permitted. You won't be able to be in the space with people. And that's as it should be. It's for me, it's an honor to work with people, but it's also just that you're responsible for this person. If they go into catharsis in 60 seconds flat, you better know your shit. You better know exactly what to do so that they're safe. And you can't do that by attending a workshop. And you certainly can't do it by just working online. You've got to have in-proximity training. Our training that's launching we've sort of revamped it. It's launching again in January. It's going to be a 12-month program. That's what we're talking about. Just like if you went to do psychotherapy or any other, professional vocation, you would expect to go through some pretty rigorous training. Breathwork is no different. And I love the direction it's heading in that sense. Yeah.
Yes. So one thing I've noticed with breathwork is they want to profess to how powerful breathwork is. So they'll say, it's life-changing. You can have mystical experiences. It will cure your depression and you'll meet your ancestors. But then they don't want to do the necessary steps to make it safe. It's like, you won't believe how powerful this is, but it's just going to be me and 100 breath workers and, way under supported, or it's just going to be me. It's just a book or something. You're just reading it with no support. So it feels like, you can't have both things. You can't have this is a nuclear bomb to your psyche and, well, we're not really going to take those safety measures. So, I think, as you were saying, professionalization is coming. Thank God I'm involved in those conversations with the GBPA and other organizations. There is going to be a lot of challenges to regulation because I think a lot of people do just want to do what they want without any consequences, and they don't want any oversight. But unfortunately, that will probably sink the whole industry.
Well, people are going to do what they want to do when all's said and done. But the more we can sort of get it out there and talk about not only the positives and the power and all of that, but also the fact that it is powerful and therefore it should be not treated lightly. It should be treated with respect and it should be delivered respectfully. And part of that is looking after the safety of your clients. So I heard recently, I think you know this one, Rich, a guy who'd literally just graduated from a purely online training, I think. And he went off and did a workshop for 50 people. And it was in person. And he simply wasn't equipped to do that. So a lot of people ended up in various states of distress, and he was scuppered, basically. And there's a lot of, everybody's got that story. So we're pretty much coming in from the opposite direction, I think, which the idea of ratios, like you're working with a group, it's 5-1. You're working online, it's 15-1. Those seem reasonable. And even when you've got the 15-1, you have backup people there and breakout rooms in case anybody gets into trouble. So I feel like you don't know what you don't know. So people are having these amazing experiences about like, this is for me. This is my work. They don't necessarily want to put the work in. They just want the kind of the power aspect. And I've definitely been there. At the beginning, I was like, fucking hell, I'm pretty hot shit here. This is really good. And people haven't, and of course they're projecting all sorts of stuff on shit. Oh my God, you just changed my life and blah, blah, blah. And I always remember the George Clooney quote. His dad sat him down at the beginning of his career and just said, look, you're going to receive a lot of adulation here. You're going to receive a lot of press. You're never as good as they say you are, but you're never as bad as they say you are either. It's a very leveling thing. And I think I always bear that in mind when people are extolling my virtues. And it's like, thank you. And I just sort of bring it back to them and say, but of course, you know that your body and your being did this. I'm your facilitator. I'm your guide. I've helped you navigate this experience. But actually, this was really you. And okay, maybe it's a part of you that isn't accessible to you all the time, but it's certainly you. It's not me using my fluence on you or anything like of that ilk. So there is that. I had a guy who came in for my interview or potential trainees, and I reject quite a few, I have to say. And one of the guys came in, bless him, and he was like quite young. He was sort of mid-20s. And we use a parallel track when we train people. So one aspect of it, I think of a DNA molecule. One strand of the DNA is how to be an amazing breath coach. And the other strand is what's my baggage and how do I deconstruct it and move beyond it? And what I've realized is that those two are pretty much inseparable. Just like in the same way when you did your psychotherapy training, you had to be doing therapy at the same time. So it's the same principle. If you can get as clear as you can possibly be and then come into the space as a facilitator, you're going to do a much better job than if you're bringing all sorts of stuff in with you. So this guy, I explained the DNA aspect and like, here's how to be a great breath coach. Here's how to deconstruct your baggage. And he was like, well, I'd love to know how to be a great breath coach. I think I've done all my baggage. I was just like, red flag. I did a weekend retreat a couple of weeks ago and it was like, oh, bless him. That in itself tells me he's not my guy. He's not my trainee because he's not got the emotional intelligence to understand that it's an infinite journey and that I'm 61. Do I have baggage? You bet your ass I've got baggage. And the difference is simply there's less of it and I know how to navigate it mostly, not always. So it's an ongoing thing. And I like that about it. I like the fact you never get to a point where you can say, I can do this because you're always learning, you're always expanding. And so likewise, you never get to a point where you go, okay, I've done my baggage. Let's move on and do other things. No, it's going to be there till I pop my clogs. I'm still going to have stuff when I leave and head wherever I leave. So again, you don't know what you don't know. And there's a lot of ignorance out there. So part of what, our job and part of what, this is doing is educating people in terms of how to approach it. Yes, it's amazing. And yes, it's very powerful and therefore should be treated with greatest of respect, as should your clients or potential clients.
And what would you say to someone who's considering breathwork for the first time as a customer, whatever you call them?
Yeah. I mean, great. I've had people who've come on the training thing, come into the interview, not having done it, which always seems very strange. Why would you want to be doing this as a vocation when you haven't actually tried the technique? That's something else aside. I'm all for people exploring themselves. And my advice really is just go and work with as many people as you can and feel into whether or not they're appropriate for you, because there'll be some people you're going to have better rapport with than others. So just like I was looking for a psychotherapist a couple of years ago, And I knew I wanted to work with a male because I was going to do mummy stuff and I didn't want any transference getting in the way. So I shortlisted 3 and I went to their websites. I looked at them and 2 of them were all about their diplomas and their qualifications. And I didn't really get a sense of who they were. The other guy, his first page was a blog and he talked about being in Phuket when the tsunami hit and his wife and kids had gone off shopping and he thought he'd lost them. And I was like, that's my man, definitely. And it proved when I started to work with him, I was like, yeah, absolutely. Very humane, very transparent, incredibly kind, and just with a really huge heart. It's perfect. So I think the same could be said of breath workers. Check them out. There's going to be some. In fact, I just had this conversation earlier today with a couple of trainees. It doesn't mean they're better or worse. It's just they're not for you. Or maybe they're very much for you. But check it out and see, because everybody brings their own essence to it. And that's a really important part of what we do. It's not cookie cutter. As we said before, I think it's a vehicle for you bringing whatever you've got into the arena, into the space. And that's going to look different for every single facilitator that you work with. So trust your intuition and do ask them about the qualities. Who have you trained with? It's an important question. How long have you been doing this? How's your self-practice? That sort of thing.
Yeah. And there are bad breath workers out there as well.
Oh, yeah. Just like in any profession. Yeah. The doctor we talked about just prior to the recording, my Greek friend, just like it's no different to any other profession. There's different levels of competence within it. And that's why the sort of the safety aspect and the procedural stuff that's being put in place now and the professionalization of the whole sector is so important.
Yeah. Just going back to that point about constant work, I think there is like some nuance there. One thing I see in the wellness industry is this idea of like just perpetual self-development for the sake of self-development. I think, so I like to frame breathwork, conscious connected breathwork, as medicine. Like it is medicine for mental illness, mood disorders and things like that. And you don't necessarily take medicine forever. Once you're healed, you don't need to take that same medicine. And I think I like the analogy of like a rocket ship. A rocket has different blasters as it goes through the atmosphere. You need different, blasters, rockets, propellants different stages. And I think for some people, once you're out of depression, or once I was out of depression and addiction, I needed to focus less on, I'm sick and I'm healing myself, into, okay, am I going to make myself more resilient to stress? Yeah. And there is that brilliant quote from Chris Williamson where he says, there are 2 types of people in this world: people who don't know they need self-development work and people who don't know when to stop.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not like, I work with breath. Obviously I work with it a lot. So I was just on vacation the week before last. I was with my partner. It was beautiful. We were on a little island in the Indian Ocean. And what I wanted to do there was just drop into nature. And that in itself is healing. So I think the way I look at it, and I think the way you're approaching it, is it's a toolkit. And breath is a really great tool to have in your kit, no doubt. But I use a lot of silence. I'm in silence quite a lot of the time. Stillness. I'm intrigued by grounding and by connecting to the earth. So I'm out in nature a lot. It's walking or being in the ocean. I'm lucky I live near the beach and stuff. So that's very important. I read a lot. I'm still interested in input. My antennae are always open for stuff that maybe I don't know about or maybe I haven't heard about. And I'll feel I call it the flash. If I get the flash, I'll go and check it out. And that's normally my intuition saying this one is for you. And sometimes I don't get it. That's great. So I'm open to it, but I don't want to be obsessive about it. I want to have a life. I'm not a monk or something. My body is a temple. Well, yeah. And I love the odd glass of wine. And it seems to me like a really nice thing to do. And I'm a bit of a car nut. So there's all that. So it's like, you don't become less, you don't become this sort of, I think some people are expecting sort of rarefied version. One of the best things I've ever heard anybody say about breathwork, it was a friend of mine, Alan, and he was asked, how are you different as a result of the work you've done? And he just simply said, I'm more me. And that was just so beautifully simple and yet very profound at the same time. And I feel that's part of it. I'm just so much more accepting of myself. And part of that is giving myself a break and having my really slow mornings and understanding how I work best and not being nose to the grindstone all the time, whether it's self-development or work, and giving myself this 8 months period to just kick back a little bit and just take stock and enjoy.
Can you talk a bit about that, Alan? I know you're taking this 8 months off. You've given so much to breath work. What's this 8 months about for you?
So what it was, I hit 60 last year,
Right.
and people were talking a lot about, the decade and all of that. And I was just like, I'm just really happy to be here. I feel really glad to be here with a really nice life. And I just feel very grateful. And as that was happening, at the same time, I could feel something shifting within me. And I couldn't put any words to it, but I was feeling this sort of inner wave, if you like. And the last time I had that was Saudi Arabia, when I left and changed career and did something quite different, i.e. this. And I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to let it roll and just give it its time. Don't try and push it through, And it's one of the things I say to my clients all the time. We're taught to want things now, or preferably by yesterday. And I feel like the way nature works, and we are part of nature, obviously, the way nature works is very gradually. You don't just go from spring to summer. It's a gradual transition, summer to autumn. And I feel like we're like, it's very incremental. You almost wouldn't notice it. So I wanted to really honor that, and I let it roll for a bit. And then one of my friends was around for lunch. I think it was January or February, and I was still having this feeling. I could feel it growing, but I had absolutely no idea what it looked like. And she said, "Oh, do you know your house has doubled in value since you bought it 3 years ago?" And I was like, I did not know that. But that is very key information. And I realized at that point, it was about shifting gears and giving myself some more space and time. And part of that is writing the book. As a consequence of that Guardian article that we referred to earlier, I got an offer from a pretty major publisher who were very interested in collaborating on something around anxiety. And I love literature. I'm always reading. I like writing. I love the whole editing process. So that was just right up my street. And it had been sort of on the periphery, but never really had the opportunity to do that. So consequently, sold the place. Literally from putting it on the market to money being in the bank was 8 weeks. That's unheard of. I live in Spain. It took me 11 months to buy the place and 8 weeks to actually sell it. So I knew I had some pretty interesting universal help happening there. I was watching it going down thinking, this is outrageous, and it just was so smooth. And and that's now all done. So it seemed like a good time to step back. And we've used it for Breathguru as well to step back a little bit and for us all to sort of recalibrate. And what's come up is we're going to revamp the training. And we've got some ideas, Richard, actually coming in as part of that revamped look for the training. And this whole thing that we were talking about earlier, which is professionalization of the industry and the sector, and just very excited about it. We've already got a great program. It's going to be even better. And I love that. And I think it's quite different to anything that's out there. So that being said, happily, I've got some great people in the team who are doing most of that, for me. And I get to sort of step back a bit and think about how I'm going to approach the book. And part of that is giving yourself space and time to just let it percolate. I'm not somebody who can do a full day's work and then plug in and be really inspired. That's not how I work. I need my rest time. So that's what this period's about from now until, well, when I estimate something, I pretty much always get it 100% wrong. So what I've decided to do is I'm estimating it will take 4 months. So in fact, it will probably take about 8. So we've got our first training group coming in to Lanzarote in February 2025, middle of. So from now till then should be enough time, I think.
Brilliant.
So it's exciting. I haven't done this since I was 40. I took a year out to retrain when I was 40. So 61 feels like a good time to take another gap year.
You've definitely earned it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But where do people find you for the time being?
Yeah, so I'm still working. We've got a summer camp next week that's online. It's free. It's a 3-day one, and it's designed with zero knowledge in mind. You don't need to have done any breathwork whatsoever. And that's happening at 7 p.m. UK time to 9 p.m. UK time, 3 evenings next week. I'll be in London in September, London in November, and I've got 2 existing groups that are on the go. They're coming in for their graduation weeks. One is coming in on the 28th of this month. The other one is coming in at the end of October. So it's not like I've stopped completely, but it's definitely way, way less than I'm normally doing. So yeah, it's all good. And it's nice to have some space and time. Tomorrow I've got a free day. That just does not happen usually. So I'm going to be a beach bum and just head to the beach and maybe go for a walk and wander the coast a little bit. So this all feels like very timely. I feel ready to do it differently.
Absolutely.
And also to let other people in, with Rich coming in at the end of this year. It's great. So this is like a transition period of me sort of stepping back a little bit and letting the younger people come to the fore.
There we go.
Absolutely.
Well, best of luck with all
Excited for that. Yes.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for your time, Alan. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Total pleasure hanging out with you guys. Nice to meet you, Andy. And anything I can do that's going to promote breathwork, I'm up. Whatever it is, whatever it looks like, I'm there usually. So thanks very much for taking time out. And nice to talk with you both. And see you soon, Richard. And Andy, where are you based?
I'm in London, and I didn't actually tell you this earlier, but I'll be seeing you for a 1-to-1 in about a month's time.
Okay, great. You're on the next London trip. Brilliant, because I was just about to offer you a place, so you've already done it. You beat me to it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll look forward to that. And thanks so much, both, and take care. Lots of love.
Take care. Bye. Wow.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. That was awesome. He's so eloquent, isn't he? You just have to do it so light touch. You just don't have to guide him too much. He's just straight into where you want him to go.
Yeah, exactly. We had a running order, and he kind of just, I don't know, maybe he read our minds or something.
So
he kept on answering the next question in the running order.
It sounds like for periods we just switched off, but we were actually just engaged and observing him go over exactly what we wanted him to go over.
Yes, indeed. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. We didn't mention where to find Alan. It's at breathguru.com and at breathguru on Instagram. And he's available in London. He does retreats in Lanzarote, does his teacher trainings, which, as he mentioned, I'll be visiting out in Spain. I'll be teaching on those as well in the future. And given that I'll be there, you probably want to sign up now, don't you?
Yeah, don't let that put you off. Alan's a really good guy, and you won't see much of it.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I mean they're discounting now just to offset the lack of value you'll get from me. Yeah, it's a big discount.
To be fair, there aren't many people in the world who've done as much for breathwork as him over what did he say, 20-year period. So definitely well worth checking out his work, and he's such a nice guy as well.
Totes. All right. Well, thank you, listener. You find us at
Andy Esam at
The Breath Geek and
Richard's website, richardlblake.com.
That's right. And all good podcasting hosts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You know how to find a podcast by now. All right. Cheers, Andy.
Cheers, Rich. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.